Hello Street Snappers, and welcome to another street photography Q&A video. A fairly short one today, but we've got questions about film photography, what qualities a street photographer needs, how you get over a creative void, what to do in a lockdown, how to find stories, the eye contact issue, and much more. But before we go on, I just wanted to very briefly mention Joel Meyerowitz, who, as you probably know, is a street photography great. Now, I'm a big fan of Joel and his work, and I'll very soon be making a video about his contribution to the world of street photography. But in the meantime, I just wanted to share this with you. I've teamed up with Joel and the team at Masters of Photography to help spread the word about Joel's online street photography workshop, which I think is really very good. And I won't go into great detail about it here, but if you want to take a look, I'll put a link in the description below. So the first question today is from Kathy Price from Venice, who asks, would you use a film camera for street photography? Well, most definitely, yes. I don't use film often enough myself, but I am a big fan of it. I think it makes you shoot in a very different way. It really slows you down. It makes you think more. And do you know what? I think people love you for it. So many people will stop you on the street to ask you about your camera and want to talk about it and want to engage with you. And that's usually very nice, not always, but it's usually a really nice thing to happen. And a lot of people just smile at you. Maybe they think you're crazy using an old camera, but people tend to warm to these cameras that look old. So you kind of have less issues on the street, shall we say. But more seriously, then you have everything that goes with film. The processing, which you can do at home very simply and cheaply. I mean, I process my own negatives just in the bathroom. I then scan them, and that takes me back into the digital process. And yeah, I'd love an enlarger, and I'd love to be able to print at home, but we just don't have the space. But the main thing is, I like the look of film that's really hard to describe. But it's kind of imperfect. You know, you shoot with an old beast like this and it's always going to be imperfect, even though these big 6x6 negatives are very good. And I think one of the problems with digital is that it's kind of too sharp and it's almost too perfect, almost unreal. And I find that the softer qualities of film, particularly something like, I've got some here, particularly like this portrait, it's just lovely and soft, and it's got a slightly vintage feel to it, but it is wonderful. It's really engaging. So I hope that answers your question, Kathy. The answer is definitely yes. So the next question is from Jovis Lee Howison, who asks, what top 5 qualities make a good street photographer? Well, that's a really interesting question, Jovis, and I will probably do a longer video on this at some later point. But in the meantime, and fairly briefly, 5 qualities. I think, first of all, you need patience. You need to play the long game here and not expect great things to happen all the time. They don't. So you've got to have patience. You've got to have great observation skills. That kind of goes without saying, but the good street photographers are really good observers with an eye for detail. Thirdly, you need the ability to make connections. Street photography is often about connecting things together in a frame, things that might not normally belong together. All about making connections, and your mind needs to think in this way, where you can make connections easily. Fourthly, and I guess this depends on the kind of street photographer you are and the sort of street photography you enjoy, but I find that a playful sense of humour is really helpful. And you need to be able to see the funny side of life and maybe find humour in something that other people would maybe miss. And fifthly, you asked for 5 things. Number 5 is you absolutely must be streetwise. And that means having an awareness of what's going on around you. It means the ability to anticipate. It means an ability to blend in and sort of become part of the street. And I think that is me. I remember when I was a kid, I just felt the street was my natural habitat. I was happy on the street. I felt part of the street. And I think maybe this is what has made me a street photographer. I just love the street. And you've got to have that passion for street and street life and street people and things happening. So you've got to be streetwise. So there you have it. Those are the 5 qualities I think will help you to become a good street photographer. So next question, and this one is from Brian Duffy. What's the best camera for street photography? And I'm not going to turn this into a gear fest, but the simple answer, Brian, is the one that works for you. As I often say in these videos, there really is no right or wrong in street photography, and we must do what works for us. But my view is the camera needs to be reasonably small, light and stealthy. I do a lot of shooting at night, so for me, good low light capability is essential. Simplicity of use is a big factor for me in street photography because we've got to work quickly sometimes, and the camera's just got to feel right and perfect in the hand. So the fewer buttons, the better. And this is why I'm drawn to the Fujifilm system. And most of their cameras follow this very clear form factor where you have all the important controls here on the top. And okay, there's a menu here if you need it for all that clever stuff, but I find that once it's set up, it's set up. So for me, the best camera is small, quiet, good in low light, ideally has a fixed wide angle lens. So everything that this Fujifilm X100 is just about perfect. And I think you'll never need anything else for street photography. So I hope that answers it. So next we have a question from Pete Jusif. I've heard some street photographers say that any interaction with the subject, especially eye contact, invalidates the shot as true street. What are your thoughts? Well, I don't think it invalidates it, Pete. As I've seen some truly great street images involve eye contact, and sometimes you need eye contact just to make the shot work. And if we look at this shot, for example, a classic image from Gary Winogrand, it's all about eye contact. It's all about that girl's eye contact, which adds a real spark to the image. And it wouldn't be the same without it. And the way she's looking at Gary, she seems to have just busted him as he was taking the picture. But my approach is generally to avoid eye contact, because once that eye contact is made, the person or the people in your scene will probably change their behavior or stop doing what they were doing, or maybe turn away from the camera. And Joel Meyerowitz calls this bruising the scene, when someone spots the camera and the critical moment is lost. So unless I specifically need it to make that particular shot work, it's no eye contact for me and no engagement, no interaction with the subject. I hope that answers the question there for you. Next question is from Louis Detroit. How do you handle times when you're going through a creative void? And this happens to all creatives, I think, whether you're a filmmaker, a graphic designer, a photographer, a writer. It happens to all creatives. And we all deal with it differently, but you asked how I handle it. And well, I find a bit of solitude helps, actually. So I'll spend a day, maybe a couple of days on my own, just with a notebook, walking, thinking, reflecting, probably without a camera. I'll also deep dive into some good photo books, probably ones that I haven't read before to give me a bit of inspiration. I will probably watch films and really observe the cinematography, maybe taking some influences from that. But Louis, I've been doing this for long enough not to let it worry me. I think it happens to all of us, and you just got to have faith, have trust in the fact that your spark will come back. And I think trying to force it can be a mistake. Just let it happen. It will come back. We all have these voids. It's not you, it's all of us. So next question is from Chris J from London, who asks, quite a long question. What, if anything, have you learned about your photography or photographic processes in lockdown? And what's your best suggestions for addressing lockdown lassitude in order for one to get out there photographing again? And then he goes on to say, he asks this because he's finding it depressing even thinking about taking shots of people wearing masks at the moment. Well, very topical question. I've learned that thinking and planning is so essential for photographers, and it's just too easy to go out there without a plan, shooting away and ultimately going home disappointed. So for me, lockdown has forced me to really think, to the point that I've almost got too much to think about. There's too much going on in my mind. I'm doing so much thinking, planning ahead, working out what I'm going to do when things are good. I've got so many initiatives and projects in the incubator. And this all means that I'm going to be really busy once we're allowed out to play again. And then, Chris, you mentioned shooting people in masks. Well, I wouldn't worry too much about this, and I'd see it as a positive, actually. I think it's a remarkable time in history that we're going through now, and it'll be looked at with incredulity in 20 or 50 years' time. So I think we'd be missing something if we didn't document all this. So bearing in mind common sense and safety rules and all that stuff, I would encourage you, if possible, to get out there and just document this in your style. Give it your take. So that's how I deal with the people with masks. As for getting through lockdown, just use the time wisely. I tried to in the first lockdown, and I probably made the mistake of having too much downtime and not taking it seriously enough and not seizing the opportunity, but I'm certainly doing that now. So the next question, I always get this name wrong, Piotr, and I will apologise now. So it's Piotr Pristula, who asks, how do you take street photos in busy situations, crowded streets, street demonstrations, protests, etc., and how do you look for a good story in these situations? It's another great question, and again, I think it's one probably for a longer video. But let's separate this into the two different scenarios. So we've got shooting on crowded streets and shooting at demos or protests. So in crowded streets, I'm really focused on the moment. I'm looking for oddities, the unusual in the usual, the quirks of human behaviour, absurdities. And these are what you can find on crowded streets, rather than looking for beautiful light or trying to overthink it. Just be thinking about what the people are doing. Sometimes you find these absurdities, sometimes you don't. And that's all part of the joy of street photography. Well, it is for me anyway. And when it comes to protests and demos, I do a lot of this stuff, and I try to tackle these with a story already in my mind, so I pre-think it. I won't just turn up and shoot, hoping that I can construct a story from all the pictures I've taken. The photojournalist in me, and this is part of what I do for a living, the photojournalist in me will spend a lot of time before the event thinking about narratives, thinking about stories, thinking about angles, perspectives. So when I do start to shoot, I know pretty much what I'm looking for. I know where I'm going with this. I'm not leaving it to chance. I'll sometimes even have a storyboard in my head of how the shots will pan out. And we all see lots of really boring shots of protests, and they're usually of people holding up signs and stuff. But the really powerful shots we see often come straight out of the photographer's vision to create a story. Now, having said that, there are always really good standalone, spontaneous shots to be had, and don't overlook those, whatever you do. And I guess that the serendipity of getting those just adds to the fun. But for me, it's the story all the way. And you need to work out what your story is, because it's unlikely to just happen. So I hope I have answered the two parts of your question there. And the last question for today, which is a quick one from Vince Brooker. Any thoughts on the new 27mm lens? And he's referring, I assume, to the new Fujifilm 27mm lens, which was launched just last week. So this is a pancake lens, a 40mm equivalent in full frame terms, f2.8, it's weather sealed, and it's unlike the Mark 1 version, it has an aperture ring, which I think is a great addition, as is the weather sealing as it happens. And I think it's probably a bit faster. It's just a better lens all round. And I've not tried it yet, Vince, so I can't give you accurate feedback, but on the face of it, and knowing what I know about it, it looks ideal for street photography. I did have the previous version, and I loved it. It was sharp enough, it was contrasty enough, it was small and light. What's not to like? So I think that is all the questions for today. Thanks to everyone who did submit a question for this. And thanks also to those who put a question in that didn't make it in today's videos. But don't worry, your question is on my list, it's on the back burner, and I will answer it next time. I just want to have a kind of spread of different types of questions and a nice balance. So, as always, thanks for watching. I hope you found this useful. Please feel free to ask questions or leave comments below or email me. I will do my best to get back to you. If you would like to subscribe to my street photography newsletter, I will drop a link in the description box below, so do have a look at that. And there we are. Stay safe. I hope to see you next time, and bye for now.